Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
What's up, y'all? You're listening to the latest episode of the Tigers Podcast. I'm Frank Bonner, joined by co-host Steven Johnson as always. And as you know, the men's basketball team got a much-needed bounce-back victory on the road at Tulsa following Penny Hardaway's apology for the outburst last week. And on the football side of things, the recruitment is continuing to go well. And then the quarterback battle conversation kind of sparked up after Ryan Silverfield went on the radio and basically said both Seth Hennigan and Grant Gunnell are willing to stay here in Memphis to compete for the starting job. But before we get into all of that, I got to make sure y'all don't forget to check out some of our other podcasts, starting with Jennifer Biggs, who hosts Soundbites. Eric Barnes hosts The Sidebar. And you already know our guys, Chris Harrington and Drew Hill, have got you covered with the Grizzlies podcast every week. You can find all of these anywhere you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Music, dailymemphian.com. Now, Steven, before we dive into the actual game against Tulsa, what was the mood like in that locker room and from that team going into this week after what happened last week?
From what I judged of it, just listening to the guys kind of after the post game and things like that, it seems like it kind of had a rallying effect on the team. Of course, the players saw it immediately right after. I'm sure it went viral. So Tyler Harris said he was hurt to see Penny going through that and feeling that way, just because how much Penny cares about the city, about the program. Josh Minot was like, Penny kind of took the words out of his mouth. I guess he's not a big fan of media, even though he's so good at talking to us. So, and I think Alo also had his back. So I think all in all, it kind of had a rallying effect, and it brought the team together. Penny, they said the halftime speech was very positive, after his apology, even though they were down 13 points. And Penny decided not to bring the red shirts, the injured guys. He just wanted the guys that would be able to play. So they played tight-knit, and I would say before the game, I think they were starting to circle the wagons and kind of just rally around each other.
Yeah, and if you look at how that game at Tulsa, kind of played out, what were some of the key takeaways from what they were doing wrong when they got down to what they were able to fix to finally pull it out?
Well, I think defensively we saw a much better effort in the second half than we did the first half. I think they gave up 50 points in that first half, if I remember correctly. Tulsa was just getting a lot of easy shots, and we've seen that a couple times with their defense. Penny Hardaway said he opted to switch Alo onto like a non-ball handler and kind of let Lomax be that free safety, so they caused a little more havoc, as you saw by that last defensive possession where they were just all kind of on a string, just locked in. So I think that was the biggest change. Tyler Harris, just more and more Tyler Harris and what he's able to do. So I think Tyler Harris and Josh Minot kind of led the way. Josh Minot went 10 of 10 from the free throw line. And as much pain free throws have cost Memphis, not only this year, but kind of just historically, I can't remember the last time they had a player shoot that many free throws and make all of them. So I think they just made a couple subtle changes. They kept playing hard, and eventually I think partially their talent kind of won out in the end as well, too.
Now, is it too much to say, not necessarily from a pure talent and potential standpoint, but just for what they've been for Memphis this year, is it too much to say that Tyler Harris has probably been, one of, if not the best player on the team so far?
I think it's fair to say that he's probably been the most impactful, and at this point, you could argue the most consistent. I still think at their peak, like a guy like Jalen Duren or maybe even a DeAndre, they can just dominate a game in a different way than Tyler can, even though Tyler just scored 24 points and hit 6 3-pointers. But I think with Tyler, he provides so much energy to the team. Him and Minot are kind of in the same, like Minot being the big guy that does it with those dunks, those and ones, and all those highlight plays. And Tyler does it from the guard spot, being able to hit those deep 3-pointers. He's a big shot taker and a big shot maker. So I think if anything, it seems like he might be the Tigers closer, which I think is honestly the biggest surprise considering all the talent in front of him. But he's just kept working and he's kept producing. And on a lot of nights when you're not sure what you're going to get from an Imani Bates or Lester Quinones or a Landers Nolan when he's healthy, Tyler normally has done a pretty good job of filling in. And we've seen him hit big shots late now, and I think multiple games. So if I'm not going to go and say that he's the best, but I think he's definitely the most impactful. And I think in the clutch, in the close games, I think Penny Hardaway said to himself he has the most confidence in Tyler taking those last shots.
Now, Memphis hasn't won a game by double digits since they beat Wichita State on January 1st. Going into this East Carolina game, what are you expecting from them after losing on that buzzer beater to East Carolina the first game?
I think this could be a game where we could finally see them win by double digits. I wouldn't be surprised if this is Josh Minot said on the radio that they want to come out and make a statement against East Carolina because of what happened. So they were up almost 20 points on the last time. They were clearly the better team, even though they only had 7 guys, and I think they had to play a walk-in to Darius Jacobs. So that's how many bodies they had at the end against East Carolina. I think the hope is they'll get maybe one more person back before Thursday or before the game. So I think they're at home, knowing what happened last game, and knowing that I don't think they can really afford any more losses. Even to Houston, I think they need to beat Houston twice now because the last thing I looked at, they're not even on the bubble right now. So they had to get back on it. And so when you factor in the buzzer beater, when you factor in the fact that they just can't afford to lose any more games, and it's at home, blackout game, there might be a decent crowd, better than you might expect for a game against East Carolina. So they have the talent. I think this should be a game where they should roll. I wonder what the line is at, but this might be one of the few times I will put money on Memphis to actually cover.
Now, this is the part of the schedule where you play teams twice, right? Mm-hmm. This was the second time they played Tulsa. This will be the second time they played East Carolina. Mm-hmm. When you're facing a team for the second time around, I guess what advantages and what challenges do you think Memphis has after seeing them once already?
Well, I think sometimes Penny tells us that like they go over the game plan and in practice and whatnot, and then sometimes guys don't execute. I think when you're able to face another team twice, especially coming after a loss the first game, I think in theory you will probably find it easier to really hit home some of those lessons you're trying to teach. Like you understand now, it's not just coach speak. You saw firsthand, if we don't lock in on the 3-point line, if we let this guy get off or that guy get off, then even though we're the more talented team, these guys have shown already they can beat us. So I think the Tigers should come out a little bit more prepared. And honestly, it was just really a collapse in those last 2 minutes because up until that point, they had executed at a very high level. So I think for the Tigers, it's just going to be about they know exactly what works and what doesn't work. So in theory, you would think you would see them start strong and hopefully try to pick off and play like they did in those first 38 minutes as opposed to the last 2 minutes where they collapsed and blew a double-digit lead.
Yeah, are you worried about that at all? Because even against Tulsa, they had a not a majorly significant lead, but they
got up 7 late.
Yeah, they were up 7 late, and then Tulsa kind of came back and threatened the win. Are you concerned with the way that they close out games?
Absolutely. They have not. They're not. I wouldn't consider them a good closing team right now. Even I think the first time against Tulsa, Tulsa worked that big lead down, had a chance I think to tie it at the buzzer or maybe win it. Cincinnati, I think they did okay, but a lot of times if you look at it, most of their losses are close because they haven't been able to make the plays in the clutch. Tulane, Murray State, Georgia, Ole Miss. Ole Miss was a little different because they just had that frantic comeback. But so many of their losses have been close, and it's just because I should really go into deep dive on this. A lot of those times in those games, they're going those last 3.5 minutes without getting a field goal, while other teams are getting free throws and things like that. So right now, I definitely think that's a concern because when you get to play in Houston and maybe at SMU, those are going to be your 3 biggest games. Next week at Cincinnati is going to be big too. I'm expecting those games to be close, so it's like Memphis. You need these wins. Are you going to be able to close out in those final 4 minutes and 3 minutes instead of what we've been seeing lately, which is their offense kind of gets really tight. They're not making field goals. They can really only score at the free throw line. So hopefully Thursday is the game where they won't have to practice that, but that is an area they have to get better at for sure.
Yeah, I know you said before we started recording, you said, with this Memphis team, you got to take it one game at a time. And this East Carolina game could be another stepping stone to trying to get some type of streak going, 3-4 games in a row to try to close out this season. Moving on to the football side of things, Ryan Silverfield is still doing his thing recruiting. I know he had the Memphis's best recruiting class last season, and he's won, according to the Rivals rankings, he's one spot ahead this year, being ranked at 47. And so I know when McIntyre left, one of the questions we had was that going to affect recruiting on the defensive side of the ball? And it looks like it hasn't. Even before they hired Matt Barnes, they were still getting guys. And so I think Silverfield has done a great job of, honing in and keeping his recruiting class despite the coaching changes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Ryan, I think if there's anything Ryan has proven in his first couple of years is he's a top-notch recruiter, especially at this group of 5 level. They have a 4-star kid committed in Joshua White, Tevin Carter, the local kid, depending on where you look, was or is a 4-star. So it looks like he's hit everywhere. They gotten a couple guys have had some SEC offers. So it looks like Memphis will once again have a big influx of talent in terms of their freshman class. But, of course, I think everybody is curious about the quarterback battle. We talked about it a little bit last week because Ryan actually went on the air at the same time we were recording. So it looks like they're going to have Seth Hennigan and Grant Gunnell back, Tevin Carter early enrollee. And I think they also have another quarterback signed as well, J.C. French from Georgia. So with potentially 3 guys, maybe even 4 competing for the job, do you think there's going to be some turnover maybe after we get outside the spring once a guy learns that, hey, I'm probably not going to win the job this year?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see it. I mean, we saw it this last season with Keelan leaving and then Peter Parrish. I don't know if we'll see – I mean, based off of what Ryan is saying, I don't know if we'll see Seth or Grant leaving. Maybe one of them may leave if they lose the starting job. But with all those quarterbacks, one of them is going to be gone because one of them is going to feel like I can be a starter somewhere else. And I wrote in our Insider today that I think the starting job is Seth Hennigan's to lose because you look at the last offseason, you could argue that it was Grant Gunnell's to lose. He was the only quarterback who had college experience. Then he gets hurt. Now you look at this offseason, Seth Hennigan is the only quarterback on the roster who has thrown a pass in the Tigers uniform. And he's won the locker room. The coaching staff has seen what he's able to do as a freshman. You only expect him to get even better this year. And so if you're Grant Gunnell, you can't just prove that you're just as good as Seth. Because if you're just as good as Seth and it's a toss-up between who can do the job, they're probably going to lean towards Seth because he did the job last year. You've got to go out and prove that you're better than Seth in order to steal the job from him.
Are you surprised that he stuck around just to compete for the job? I mean, I know he can still easily transfer at the spring, and they're going to be – I mean, nobody's going to turn away a quarterback, especially one that has experience. But were you surprised that he wanted to stick it out for the spring?
Yeah, it did surprise me. I was anticipating to see a transfer at that quarterback position with one of them. But now that he's staying, I wonder if it's because – the consensus was that the job was Grant's before he got hurt. And so if you're Grant, you're probably feeling like, well, now that I'm healthy, I can go get my job back. And so maybe that's where his mindset is. But, yeah, I was surprised. Just because Seth did so well as a freshman quarterback, I would have thought Grant could have been like, well, I can go, get a starting job somewhere else and I have to compete as hard as I'm going to have to compete for this job.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. So jumping back to recruiting for a second, I'm looking at the Tigers' top 10 or so commits. You take away the 2 quarterbacks and Sutton Smith, who's a running back. I would say it looks like their top 6 to 8 commits are on the defensive side of the ball. What do you think about the kind of this crop of defensive guys Memphis has brought in, and what type of impact do you think any of them could possibly have in next year?
Yeah, I think that's big because if you look at, and we talked about this last podcast, is a lot of the super seniors or the fifth-year seniors that Memphis called them were on the defensive side of the ball. And so you're losing a lot of that defensively. And so to bring in a recruiting class that's top-heavy on the defensive side of the ball, I think is good for Memphis. And then, a lot of they've brought in a lot of transfers that are defensive guys, linebackers, and defensive tackles, and so on. And so I think, this recruiting class on the defensive side of the ball will have ample opportunity to find a role almost immediately, especially the ones that are on the spring roster, because you get that extra set of practices. And I think that's going to be huge for the people in this 2022 class who decided to sign early and come early in the spring, because then you'll be acclimated with this culture, with this team, and you'll have a leg up on some of the other guys also trying to get some playing time.
So I know it's still very early. We got to go through spring. We know there's going to be some more attrition, but based off the talent they've kind of acquired through the transfer portal and what the class looks like now, plus the guys they got coming back, what do you think would be a reasonable expectation for this team last year, especially considering that as of now, it looks like they'll be returning Seth Hennigan? You
mean in terms of like standings in the conference?
Mm-hmm.
I think they could be top 4, possibly in the top 3, because if you look at the losses that they had this past year, I mean, the UTSA loss, the Temple loss, they've had a lot of close games. Not too much different than what you're saying about the basketball team in terms of not being able to close out close games. Well, the year before they were able to do that. They struggled this year. A couple of games they had too many turnovers and fumbles. So if you clean that up, you win the close games. That 6-6 record could have easily been 8-4. If you clean some of that up, and then you have either a quarterback in Seth Hennigan who's going to be in his second year, or a quarterback in Grant Gunnell who's already started 2 years. I think if they can stay healthy, there's no reason why they can't win 8 games.
I think that's a reasonable floor. I know Ryan definitely says he wants to make a bowl game every year. That's the minimum standard, and of course, being able to compete for championships. So, I mean, we're almost close to National Signing Day. I guess we could preview it a little bit more next week, but are you expecting them to sign a lot more names, or do you think they're almost kind of just done filling up the classes with transfers and whatnot?
I do expect, French, like the quarterback who didn't sign. I do think they have some signees that aren't necessarily going to be surprises. But some people who have committed who haven't signed yet. And so you're going to see some more signatures. I don't know if we're going to see any more surprise signatures, though.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll check back in with you guys next week. We'll see if the Tigers can string together another win on Thursday against ECU. And, of course, Ryan Silverfield continues to do his thing on the recruiting trail as he has done these last couple of years. Thank y'all for joining us. We'll see y'all next week.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.